So I'm going to start recording. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, lovely students and lovely listeners, for joining us today. And as usual, I've got the Holy Quran over here to my right side, and I've got my dear teacher, Sayyid Mahdi Imam Razvi, to my left-hand side. And there's a nice little candle here for dear Imam Razvi. Wherever he may be, hopefully in Jannat, is the expectation, inshallah. So I'd like to say, particularly today, a warm welcome to our sisters, especially because today our class will revolve around Islam is gender compatibility. And so you're heartily welcome here. And also to our dear new member of the Hawza, Todd, thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you here. And I'm going to dive in, actually. You may be surprised that I start Islam is gender compatibility, which is our 7th principle, by the way. So we've gone through 6 of them already, and we've got, after this one, we've got 3 more to go. So we're heading down to the final stretch. Going into Ramadan, by the way, which will be coming up in 2 weeks' time. We've got the full moon just behind us now, and we're heading for the new moon. And so in the month of Ramadan, actually, our Hawza takes a pause, our academy takes a pause, just as Imam Razvi alayhi salam used to teach us that we should take a break from all teaching activities during Ramadan to focus completely on our inner selves, and that's what we intend to do, inshallah. So in Ramadan, we won't be doing any classes, but we can still chat and exchange ideas and those kind of things, of course. But just that classes will be held then for thereafter. So this is the last class we have before Ramadan, to make a long story short. And today's class is Islam is gender compatibility manifesting through equality, and we'll talk about what that means in a moment. But before we go into that, I'd like to just remind ourselves of the principle from last month, which was Islam is justice, which was the 6th principle of Imam Razvi, alayhi salam. In our class of Usul ad-Din, which mean the principles or the roots of the faith or the roots of the religion, in other words, the roots of Islam. Why Islam is justice is important here, we'll delve into it in a moment, but the main thing I hope that we all took away from last month's class was that there is an outward justice. In other words, there's a justice in the world at large and in our own daily lives, kind of an operational justice, if you will, but there's also an inner justice. There's a justice of our souls against our experience in the current present situation and against the will, the expressed will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who provides a balance in all things. In other words, he created male and female. He created proton and electron and balanced it with neutron. He created old and young, black and white, up and down, future and past, and all these kind of time and space, all these large juxtapositions, one of them being, of course, male and female, or more accurately, masculine and feminine. And when we look at them individually, we can say, oh, these are paradoxes. Top and bottom is a paradox, or dark and light is a paradox. But indeed, this is all on the mizan, or on the balance of the creation, the khalq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who brought everything forth in a balance and in pairs, if you will, in dichotomies, in a dialogue, in a conversation. And in fact, all of these juxtapositions that we talked about should not be examined as hard paradoxes, but rather as a dialogue between polar opposites that were created in order to manifest tension. Yeah, exactly. Eastern spirituality would call it yin and yang, specifically Taoism and Confucianism. So that is completely accurate. Thank you, Jana. And all of these, and exactly, because if you look at the yin yang symbol, that's a great example. You can see how, although there are these kind of seemingly polar opposites, the yang is within the yin and the yin is within the yang, and they all form a holistic whole, or a holistic circle. And that is exactly what Islam teaches us as well. It teaches us about mizan, about balance. In Quran, Ar-Rahman, the Surah Ar-Rahman, the merciful, the Surah 55 in the standard version of the Quran. You'll find 55 verse 9, you'll find it talking about justice and balance in the same phrase. Don't cheat the balance, but weigh with justice and don't cheat the balance. Yeah, don't try to cheat the balance because you can't. Okay, there's no way to cheat the balance of creation as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it. So, hoping to have bridged somewhat the gap between Islamist justice and gender compatibility, I'd like to dive right now into our class for today. Or before I do so, are there any further questions about Islamist justice or any further comments that any one of you would like to make after our discussion in the team chat with the team exercise and so on? If none occur to us now, I'll take the liberty of advancing to our seventh principle. Islam is gender compatibility. And I'd like to ask you first if you can see our screen today. Can someone give me a shout or a message in the chat whether you can see my screen? Samonajun, Jana or Todd?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, that's great. So I'm gonna just begin from the top. But again, I'd love to get your impressions today. So I want to dialogue a lot with you today about this, especially because we have a nice mizan, we have a nice balance today in our class. We have two lovely ladies, we have two gentlemen, and I'm happy to say that this is the perfect manifestation of gender compatibility and balance in our class. So let's dive in. So why do we say that Islam is gender compatibility manifested by equality? That's a large statement. Now, if you go through most of the historical schools of Islamic thought, whether it be jurisprudential schools, what are called madhahib, whether it be kind of creedal dogmas, which are called aqaid in the plural or aqidah in the singular, whether different forms of philosophy and mysticism, what is very apparent quickly is that the male voice has dominated the field of scholarship to a massive extent, and therefore the tradition, and by that I want to say the tradating, for those who are familiar with the adverb, the tradating function of the schools of jurisprudence or the schools of philosophy and even the schools of mysticism to a great extent, although not as much, it'll be mentioned in a moment, have relied mainly on the male voice to find expression. Now, although it can be said and it can be argued on a very deep level that the expression of the masculine is the voice and the expression of the feminine is silence. And again, this is a very deep thought and a deep concept. Nevertheless, what we're seeing now, and I'm actually very happy we're seeing it, is a whole lot of female scholars that are entering scholarship in Islam, whether it be through academics, whether it be through jurisprudence, whether it be through philosophy and or mysticism, indeed, mysticism. Um, and therefore there are a lot of new contributions which I think are fantastic, coming from the ladies section, or shall we say from the feminine representation of the human beings. And I'm very happy to see this development, and I think it's really necessary to see this development in order to create a little bit more mizan, a little bit more balance, and a little bit more qisti or adalat or justice simply, in the field of scholarship, in the fields of jurisprudence, philosophy, creed, hadith scholarship, Quranic hermeneutics, tasawwuf, irfaniyat, and so on, all of the Islamic sciences, if you will. So again, I'm very happy. I think it's a blessed time in the moment to witness this. And of course, the argument can be made, well, what is the difference between, a woman or a man providing the scholarship? Well, simply their own experience in life, their own experience of going through a male body or a female body, and then reading the Quran, examining the Hadith, the Sunnah, studying the ijma and the qiyas and the aql and all of the different criteria for the fiqh, for the jurisprudence, or studying all the philosophers and studying all the mysticism, of course, there's a different approach, and neither male nor female can ever claim to have 100% the full picture, because the full picture, of course, belongs only to the Khaliq wal Bari, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that means that we're automatically, by our biological gender, we're automatically biased. We come into the studies with an automatic bias as pertains to our own particular biology and our own particular experience of life. So I'm going to see some chats here. I'm going to open these actually. There's also female-specific issues that women would better understand. Exactly. There are things, very operational things, like 1 week of the month, a woman, through God's grace, going through a physical time of withdrawal in order to prepare her body to have a baby during certain ages of the life of a female. And therefore, for example, being exempt from prayer, being exempt from going to a mosque, and all such things. In other words, that the Islam actually makes it easier upon a woman in many situations in the Quran. And in fact, the Quran itself says that we have made Islam easy for you and as a relief for you. Yeah. And so there are many, many exemptions. For example, not only for a female, but also, for example, in Ramadan, if one is sick or traveling. And there are so many examples, of exemptions given or conditions given for certain obligations to be fulfilled, which are meant as a relief or as a kind of injunction to make it easier upon the human being to fulfill their Islamic obligation. So that's completely accurate. So I'd like to start by saying that, even being a male myself, and of course going through this lifetime, this experience within a physical male body, and being married to my lovely wife, Miss Samane, who's with us today. Even as such, I'm very happy to see that women's scholarship is increasing rapidly, in fact, in Islamic fields as never before. Of course, we go back to the history of Islam as such. How did Islam get started? And of course, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, entering the mountains of Hira surrounding Mecca in the day and meditating and finding peace and solace in the cave until the archangel Jibreel alayhi salam comes down with the revelation and gives him the revelation, and he comes back down the mountain. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq, sadaqallahu al-azim. The first words of the first revelation of the Quran, which is read in the name of your Lord, who created you from an embryo. That's Surah 96, 1 through 2. And what happens there is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam receives this beautiful nazal, this revelation from Allah through the archangel Gabriel alayhi salam, peace be upon him, and he descends back down the mountain and he meets his lovely wife Khadija alayha salam, and he thinks he's going crazy, or he thinks he's maybe lost his mind somehow because he's had this life-shaking experience, and it's his lovely wife who actually calms him down and steadies him and gives him her love and tells him, no, you're not crazy. You're not going off the deep end. Basically, you're completely within truth. You're within haqq. And if you've been given a mission to deliver this prophecy to humankind, basically, me as Khadija, as your wife, I'm going to support you, and I'm going to do everything that I can in order to help you realize this vision. So it's always a beautiful moment when a man has a spiritual vision and his woman supports him, yeah, or the other way around. If a woman, a wife, has a spiritual vision and her husband supports her. So this is a beautiful example of Islam being gender compatibility manifested by equality. So if Khadija in that moment, alayhi salam, turns around and says, look, I think you're completely nuts, just focus on your work or something like this, then that could have been the end of Islam, okay? And fortunately, we see that Khadija has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a specific role, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been created for a specific role, and they were created to meet each other and to have a lovely monogamous relationship for all of the lifetime, remaining lifetime of Khadija alayhi salam. So during all of the lifetime, this is very important, for all of the lifetime of the Prophet's first wife Khadija alayhi salam, he was completely monogamous with her, and she, of course, with him. So many things to be gleaned from this initial conversation, or this initial male-female dialogue in Islam, being the experience of Nazal, coming down from the archangel Jibreel alayhi salam to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the ensuing discussion thereafter with Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam, his lovely wife. And another perhaps early manifestation of the role of the woman in Islam is that the first martyr of Islam was actually a female, was actually a woman whose name was Sumaya. You may have heard this name in Islamic circles, Sumaya. It's a female name. And Sumaya was essentially the first martyr of Islam. In other words, she was one of the first Ansar who took up Islam in the time when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was just beginning his vision and beginning the teachings in Mecca. Of course, in the pagan environment of the Quraysh and the strong Arabic clans of their day, controlling the trading routes around Mecca, controlling the pagan pilgrimages to the different idols that were surrounding the Kaaba at the time, and even inside the Kaaba at the time. And indeed, Sumaya was one of the first victims of the oppression of the Quraysh. Basically, after refusing to renounce the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, she was arrested and, according to different reports, killed in different ways. For example, drawn and quartered, which is obviously a horrible way to find an end in this world. So we say Sumaya alayhi salam, we give her our blessings, and we thank her for being the first martyr in Islam, as a matter of fact. So another example, whether you're Sunni or whether you're Shia, all of these hadith have been acknowledged by scholars of all walks of Islam. So it is not a question of jurisprudence. Another manifestation, an early manifestation of Islam through the female is, of course, the Prophet Muhammad's daughter, Fatima alayhi salam. So we always say Lady Fatima when we talk about Fatima alayhi salam, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course, the wife of our dear first Imam, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and of course, fulfilling not only in her function as the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad and the wife of the designated Imam according to the three schools of the Shia, and also, by the way, nearly all of the mystic schools of Tasawwuf or mystical Islam, all of the orders, nearly all of them have Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam as their second human reference after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So of course it's Allah at the very top, obviously, and then Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the first human being, and then Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam as the second sheikh or ustad or imam in the chain of the silsila, or the golden chain of sheikhs of the specific Sufi order, whichever it may be. It can be the Mevlevi, it can be the Chishti, it can be the Jarrahi, it can be the Suhrawardi, it can be the Qadiri, the Rifa'i. There are so many different Sufi orders that all go through Ali ibn Abi Talib. And of course, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Naqshbandi order has three different chains, of which two of them also go through Imam Ali Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, one of which goes through Abu Bakr, whom the Sunni Naqshbandis call Hazrat Abu Bakr, and they put radiyallahu anhu on him. So this is the lone exception, but otherwise, even all of the Sufi orders go through Hazrat Ali, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And of course, the meaning of Fatima in this context is the mystical component of Fatima. In other words, many consider Imam Ali alayhi salam to be the outward representation of Islamic mysticism, Sufism, Irfaniyat, which is another term, a more Shia-oriented term for mysticism, is Irfaniyat in Islam. And in Sunni Islam, the word tasawwuf tends to take precedence. But the meaning is very similar. There are some different orders, structures between them, and there are some other philosophical differences, but there's a large correlation and a large overlap between irfaniyat and tasawwuf. And I do hope that we dive deeper into this in year 4, inshallah, is my expectation for all you lovely students who may desire to proceed with us further through years 2 Islamic jurisprudence and years 3 Islamic philosophy to get to year 4 Islamic mysticism. And then we will deep dive into irfaniyat and tasawwuf more. But in any case, it has been highly regarded that Lady Fatima alayhi salam, if Imam Ali Amir al-Mu'mineen is somewhat of the outer representation of Islamic mysticism, perhaps Lady Fatima is her secret. In other words, is the secret or the hidden inner essence, the breath, if you will, the breath of mysticism in Islam. And of course, Hazrat Fatima alayhi salam is also the designated head of what is called the Ahlul Bayt. And when we say the head of Ahlul Bayt, it means that all of not only the 12 Imams of the Jafari school of Islam, the so-called 12er Shia school, but also the Zaydi Imams and the Ismaili Imams, all of them, without exception, come from and originate from Hazrat Lady Fatima alayhi salam. So you can see that Hazrat Fatima alayhi salam is the head of what's called Ahlul Bayt, what is the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but more deeply Ahlul Bayt as mentioned in the Quran, for example, in verse 33, which I encourage you to look into, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, Allah desires to create perfection for you, Ya Ahlul Bayt, and bring Ahlul Bayt to a certain level of perfection, whatever that means, or infallibility or innocence, depending on how you translate certain words in verse 33. But this is true for all schools of Islam. So again, this is independent of Sunni or Shia Islam. The Hanafis, the Malikis, the Shafi'is, they all revere Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, coming from Hazrat Fatima, Lady Fatima alayhi salam. So here you have 3 golden examples at the very inception of Islam, without which Islam could not be. So I want to be very clear and say, without these 3 lovely ladies, alayhi salam ajma'in, at the beginning of Islam, there would be no Islam today, okay? There would be no Islam today without Hazrat Khadija, who sponsored the Prophet Muhammad sallam, during the time, because she was a very wealthy business lady, as a matter of fact, who sponsored the Prophet Muhammad sallam, in the time when the Muslims were forced basically outside to camp outside of Mecca, and they were denied all recourses to food and water and money and trading, and basically stripped of their property and put outside. It was Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam that provided them with income and with food and water during this stretch of, I believe, about 2 to 3 years, depending on the historians, during the beginning periods before Hijrah, basically, of Islam. So without these 3 ladies, Islam would not be what it is today. That is an absolute certainty, and it means even at the very beginning of the inception and the origin of Islam, the compatibility between genders, the manifestation of male and female together, arising together, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam. Imam Ali, Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam, with Lady Fatima, alayhi salam. And of course, the first martyr of Islam, Hazrat Sumayya, alayhi salam, along with all of the other martyrs to come. Many, of course, which were male in the following, but not only. Um, and peace be upon them all. So this is just to show you and to express, and I haven't taken the time to really type all that historical aspect of Islam being gender compatibility manifested by equality herein, but it just becomes clear that the birth of Islam itself is not possible without a balance of the male and the female elements. So it's not simply the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ by himself, it's not simply Imam Ali alayhi salam by himself, and it's not simply all the soldiers who, of course, sacrificed themselves. And of course, we look too highly to all these sacrifices during the first generation of Islam. Of the warriors parallel to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, following the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but we can't forget that the very first martyr of Islam was a woman, Hazrat Sumayya alayhi salam. So in all of these historical instances, we also see the gender compatibility and the necessity, in fact, the intentionality, the consciousness with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings us these pairs of humans, these male and female examples of what Islam truly is from the very first moment of Islam, basically from the first manifestation of Islam. I see that there's a comment in the chat. And Hazrat, yeah, without question. Hazrat Zainab, alayha salam, without question. And this is then the next generation. So when we see the sister of Imam Hussein and Imam Hassan alayhim assalam ajma'in, in the next generation, the sacrifices made, of course, in Karbala at a time when Yazid, the Caliph of the Bani Umayyah, was mocking Islam openly from the pulpit, was cursing Imam Ali openly from the pulpit, was drinking and basically behaving in a debauchery kind of manner with women of all kinds, and essentially trying to strip down Islam, being the grandson of Abu Sufyan, one of the greatest enemies of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And in the time when Yazid was basically thinking, okay, when I finish Hussein, I'm finished with Islam. There will never be Islam again. In other words, this high intentionality to finish Islam, and instead of being able to finish Islam, the exact opposite happened. Although Imam Hussein was martyred, alayhi salam, but Imam Zain al-Abidin, alayhi salam, but also especially Hazrat Zainab, Lady Zainab, alayhi salam, was able to escape and be paraded through Sham, the ancient name for Syria, at the court of Yazid. And it said that when Yazid asked Lady Zainab, alayhi salam, what did you see in Karbala? Like some kind of a sarcastic question, like almost like, how did you like it? Or how was the weather in Karbala after her brother and family was martyred? She said, all I saw was beauty. In other words, all I saw was God's will. All I saw was the manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for this beautifully powerful sentence of Hazrat Zainab, Lady Zainab, alayhi salam, and for her storytelling to the next generations, along with Imam Zain al-Abidin, the son of Imam al-Hussein, alayhum salam ajma'in, we will always cherish the memory of Lady Zainab, alayhi salam. So thank you very much for that fourth historical example of lady at the very beginning and quintessential to the manifestation of Islam. And so are there any questions or comments to that at this point before I dive deeper in? If no further comments, questions for now, I'll be glad to continue. So I'll basically start to, rather than take the historical aspect, which we just looked at quite deeply, I'll be happy to dive into the text itself that we've prepared here for you, according to Sayyid Mehdi Imam Razvi alayhi salam. Happy to show you again, picture of my dear lovely Imam. And peace and blessings be on you. And Islam is gender compatibility manifested by equality. So we begin with compatibility and we end with equality. Okay, we end with mizan, we end with a balance. We begin with a balance, we end with a balance. Manifested by equality as regards husband and wife, number one. Number two, within family life. And number three, within all communal aspects of society. Again, here the Islamic concept of al-mizan, Quran, ar-Rahman, Surah 55, verse 9, balance, is quintessential in cultivating and nourishing positive gender relationships within Islam. So one thing I want to say is that unfortunately what I'm witnessing today, especially in the generation of guys like Andrew Tate and these kind of guys, that there are a lot of kind of teenagery type of Muslims online in all parts of the Islamic world. It's not limited only to the West. It's in fact in many of the Eastern countries as well, where Andrew Tate was a very special relationship with women, to say the least. Um, comes from a very pornographic background and a very you can say antithetical or antithetical background towards women, um, which is completely destructive for gender relationships. Now, of course, the extreme opposite of Andrew Tate are these kind of wishy-washy kind of feminist type of guys, yeah, who put a woman on a pedestal and don't really get the balls to be a man. And no one is encouraging that here. So you have these two kind of, and you have a lot of that today too. So you have these two, real extremes today in gender relationships in Islam that are really bad for everyone. You have the Andrew Tates on the one hand, and you have these wishy-washy feminist male types on the other. And what we need to understand is that to be a man in Islam is a very beautiful thing and a very powerful thing, but it takes a lot of balance and it takes a lot of power and it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of study and realization of what is the role of the male within Islam. And the same goes for the female today, because females today can be tempted by many things. Oh, I can have my own job, I can have my own income, I can dress the way I want, I can read what I want, live how I want, I can even be in front of a camera if I want, yeah. And there are many women who do that, unfortunately. And because of all this freedom, which on the one hand is a wonderful thing, because now ladies can also be students of the Quran, whereas before in history they might not have been able to even read and write. Now a large majority of women worldwide, just as male, can read and write, which is a beautiful blessing. And women now are becoming scholars, as we talked about before, of all the Islamic sciences. So that's a wonderful use of freedom. But unfortunately, the devil, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, is out there in society testing women also in many different ways and bringing them down from their high actual light-filled and spiritual and mystical capacity, which they could fulfill were they to allow themselves to enter the mystical path of Islam, which, just as for males, requires a certain outward process, or a dhahiri process, an outward process, just as for the males it requires an inner process, okay? So as it is the nature of creation, males tend to be drawn toward the outward manifestation and females tend to be drawn toward the inner or batini manifestation of life, okay? But it's important that both of us learn to keep a balance. So males learn to regard more the inner aspects of Islam, and females learn to regard more the outward aspects of Islam, and that neither aspect should be lost in the working together of the gender relationships, inshallah. So that's why we need positive gender relationships in Islam, not extremes like Andrew Tate and not extremes like wishy-washy male feminists, but real balance of male and female in Islam, of female and male in Islam, of dhahiri and batini in Islam, inshallah. Wallahu la'ala. So main aspect of balance within the gender relationships is that each gender should cherish and honor its counterpart, thus recognizing indeed the wisdom and beauty manifest in God's intelligent creation. When a husband honors his wife and a wife honors her husband, each cherishing another, a healthy family can grow and a profound civilization can develop and prosper, okay? And this is indeed the goal and the light and the path of Islam. And of course, you can see that in that those that would act against Islam or somehow try to discourage Islam in theory and practice, or even limit or ban or forbid Islam, a'udhu billah, those would try to first start to destroy the gender relationships in Islam by giving the woman an incredibly unbound amount of freedom, and in fact encouraging her to follow certain deviations from the path of God, by giving the male a sense of loneliness and a profound loss of self-worth in this world, as is happening today. Through the denigration of the contributions of the male gender, particularly as we see in Western society, by the destruction of the family, by such programs, applications like Tinder, or pornographic material on the internet, and any way that the family can be destroyed, anything that can help to separate man and woman and cause fitna, what is called fitna, or yeah, deviation, or shall we say fitna is maybe divisiveness, if you will. Anything that can cause this divisiveness between man and woman is, of course, a great success for the devil, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and all his many followers in this world. So the opposite, of course, is equally true, which means that when a man honors his wife and a woman honors her husband, cherishing each other, a healthy family can grow, and a profound Islamic civilization can develop and prosper. And I see a comment here. Yeah, we see this already, like when Westerners think Islam is misogynist because it prescribes gender roles. Now, imagine it would be exactly the opposite. Imagine we would categorize misogyny as bringing woman down to the level of the male, okay? So I always try to explain it like this. The male is the outward representation of humanity, the dhahira representation, and the female or the feminine is the inward or mystical or spiritual essence of humanity. And so to bring a woman down to the level of the male in order that a woman should start working for money, should start having to pay half the mortgage of a house, or somehow be equally responsible for the account balance of a family and these kind of things, is just incredible deconstruction of the role of the feminine in human creation or civilization. Indeed, it has always been the feminine expression to be artistic, to be musical, to be outwardly beautiful in fashion, to be within all of the restrictions, of course, of tabarruj, or the limitations of what a woman can expose of her beauty outwardly, but simply through modest fashion, and through poetry and through all of the arts, in fact, permissible music, permissible theater, and all those beautiful arts that can all take place in an Islamic context. These are the feminine expressions of humanity, whereas, for example, sciences, oftentimes considered mathematics, although I would argue that mathematics is also a balance between male and female, but that's another discussion. I happen to love mathematics, and I see both the male and female side, but many would consider, because of the heavily logical influence of mathematics, would consider it a more masculine expression. So sciences, engineering, military, economics, and all these typically politics, these typically masculine fields, although it must be said that some of the greatest politicians in the history of humanity have been females as well. And in fact, that goes for science and mathematics and all of these arts as well. So, or all of these fields as well. So, but the meaning of the expression is that the higher kind of arts, or the higher expressions, really the flower of humanity, if you will, through art, architecture, music, poetry, literature, calligraphy, which is considered a feminine expression, has been brought down within the feminine expression, and in order to push females into working class situations, competing with males for jobs, pushing down the average hourly salary of the employee, causing double taxation for families into state coffers and treasuries, and therefore exploiting the woman on an unbelievable basis, and at the same time asking the woman to still have babies, still hold the family together, still harmonize the balances of family issues as only females can do, because if you left it to the males, it would just be chaos. Um, and certainly the female balance, has just completely spilled over. And nowadays, women between the ages of typically 15 and 40, not only in Western societies, now increasingly all over the world, but mainly in Western societies, are asked to do absolutely everything. Okay. And I'm asking women, why do they accept to do absolutely everything? Why do they accept this proposition? Why don't they look into what they really want for themselves and try to find expression in that? Now, I'm not saying that every woman who works nominally or has a daily 9 to 5 job or somehow reaches into classically male fields is somehow um, unhappy or doesn't know what they want for themselves. But on the other hand, the increasing number of women who are 40 and above and didn't have a child in their life because they never took care of their feminine self, or because they bounced from one relationship to the next and to the next and to the next and to the next and to the next without finally ever settling down and having a lovely family with a man who truly loved them and who took care of her, is increasing. And if they won't tell you outright because they don't want to admit it, because the level of trust is not there, although oftentimes they say it very openly. You can see it by their actions. They're, might be sitting alone at a bar somehow on a Saturday night by themselves, drinking their third shot or things like this. And this is just a really a sad status for women. And so it behooves us in a way to look in the mirror and be honest with ourselves, both the male and the female. If Islam is prescribing a gender role, it's to make you happy. This is for us to be happy. This is for males to fulfill their masculine potential and females to fulfill their feminine potential. And it doesn't mean that women should be deprived of rights in any way. The rights are prescribed in the Quran, and such democratic and political rights, such as the right to vote, suffrage, the right to vote, the right to participate in political parties, the right to free speech, the right to publication, the right to expression of art, and all of these things, of course, should be available just as equally to women as to men. And there's nothing in the Quran, absolutely nothing in the Quran, which suggests otherwise. And I say that not only to the feminists in the West, but also to our more conservative Muslim brethren, particularly the male conservative Muslim brethren that don't like to hear it. But if you can find somehow an ayat in the Quran which says that the female should not participate in politics, should not be able to have a free speech, should not be able to openly express themselves in art and music, as long as it, of course, is within the Islamic framework. If you cannot find this, if you can find this in the Quran, please bring it to me. I'm waiting for you to please bring me the ayat. I'll give you a hint. Spoiler alert, you won't find it. Okay, so women can, of course, participate in all of these things, and yet at the same time, a woman should have a right to be a mother without feeling the pressure of having to go to work and earn an income. A woman should have a right to be an artist without being forced to sell something of her product in order to gain a salary, in order to compensate for what the male was not able to earn. So the male should take care of all of the financial issues. The male should take care of buying a house, feeding the family, or renting a house, renting a car or mobility, if that's the case, whether bus and train or what have you. But this is the obligation upon the male, and the obligation upon the female, if you will, is that once she's in a steady relationship, is to take care of the children, raise the family with the values of Islam, so that the children really get the values of Islam at a very early, at the age basically of birth, and teach them Arabic and the Quranic Arabic language, and give them the tradited stories of Islam in order that there may be a harmonious and a happy family. Take care of the husband's needs, take care of the parents' needs and the children's needs in order to create a harmonious and happy family. Who doesn't want a happy family? I don't know anyone who doesn't want a happy family. But I think that most feminist women today would not any more have faith that that a happy family is possible, and would not see the beauty and the strength of a male. Okay, many women, when I say that the power of a male is a beautiful thing, they're just shocked. They don't know what to say, because feminism has completely has completely led us away from the value of the male in society, which is too bad. And unfortunately, too many wishy-washy male feminists simply acquiesce to this, rather than standing up for their own contribution in society and standing for who they are. So again, this is a balance between two extremes, complete almost hatred of women through aggressive misogyny on the part of over-conservative Muslims, particularly the young generation that I see on the internet, clamoring for Andrew Tate and such. And on the other hand, the wishy-washy feminists that we just talked about. And I see a couple of nice notes herein. And sounds like my sister, she's a complete stress case. I'm sorry to hear that. Inshallah, your sister will find Islam as you did, and she will learn, as you obviously have, to appreciate and to honor and cherish the role of the feminine within Islam, inshallah. And you're right, historically, feminism was necessary in the West because women did not have basic rights. Well, I believe historically, feminism was necessary everywhere. So I do believe that feminism had a good, let's say, had a good contribution to human society. I'm not here to drag down the entire movement of feminism or anything like that. I just think that the feminists, especially the extremist feminists, need to understand that with what they've achieved already, and also with technological developments, the ability to read and write for female, the ability to type on a computer and work in the same fields as males, therefore the ability to study and all those things, and basically the access to labor markets through women, has already achieved such a revolution, if you will, in gender relationships, that a lot has been achieved. Wonderful things have been achieved. Equality and many democratic aspects of particularly Western societies has been achieved, it must be said. And I think it's a great thing. On the other hand, sometimes a great thing can quickly turn into its opposite if it's taken to extremes. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of, quite frankly, unhappy older, especially Western ladies that have never been married or never had children, that regret the course of their lives at a too late stage, whether they admit it or not. Yeah, whether they will tell you or not. And many have told me. I've been told, I've been trusted by many older women for various reasons in my past. And I've heard many stories like this. So anyone who comes and tells me, no, that's not true, okay, just be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself, and then be honest with others. We all know what the situation is right now in the Western world, with steadily declining birth rates, broken families, too many divorces, too many children without their father and mother being together, and the like. So first, look in the mirror, be honest with yourself, and then hopefully go out and speak your mind, whatever that mind should be. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah is wisest. But I totally agree that many historical aspects of feminism were very good for the development of humanity. I just believe that this is now turning into its extreme opposite, and making many women especially unhappy, which is why I recommend Islam for women and for men equally. So continuing right along, so many very special gender-specific issues such as childbirth, menstruation, and breastfeeding of children, as Sister Jana mentioned earlier, are dealt with in the Quran and interpreted in favor of women. And specific social issues which in the history of humankind have for various reasons been filled by the male social role, such as family finances, inheritance, court proceedings, were carefully and deliberately assigned to men in Islam. Although here too, women have always had cherished rights. In fact, in Arabia, women received such rights through Islam for the first time. So indeed, women did not have any inheritance rights or right to appear as a witness in court proceedings at all, or manage family finances until the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came and brought these rights through the Quran. So, and this is historically have been approved, and anyone who wants can look it up. I'm going to let you look it up. Imam Razvi alayhi salam was consistently aware of the valuable role women play in family and society, and he established this role as a high priority in Islam. I can tell you that Imam Razvi was the most feminist Muslim guy you could possibly imagine, and yet he manifested his concept of feminism as gender compatibility, not as a pure militant, secular, communist kind of equality, but as a compatibility, okay? As a compatibility, what the male can do well, the male should do well. What the female can do well, the female should do well. So that where the male has a weakness, the woman compensates, and where the woman has a weakness, the male compensates in order to create mizan. So, as Jana was saying earlier, Sister Jana, yin and yang, yan and yin, okay? A beautiful statement of how Islam is gender compatibility is the symbol of yin yang. And we don't have to, and when we talk about, you see, because the Quran itself tells stories about the children of Israel. It tells children about Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. It tells stories about Dhul Qarnayn, who we believe today to be Kurosh Kabir, Cyrus the Great, as mentioned in the Old Testament, Azartushti, king of ancient Persia, a Zoroastrian king of ancient Persia. So we see that the Quran itself is drawing on stories from different religions. So if the Quran is doing it, why are there scholars in Islam, and this always mind boggles me, who are saying you can't take something from Christianity and use it as an example for Islam, or you can't take something from Buddhism and use it as an example for Islam? I mean, the Quran is doing it all the time, ladies and gentlemen. So let's not be so narrow-minded, but let's understand the spirit of the Quran and apply it to the present day, inshallah. And I see that there's another comment. Unfortunately, Todd is saying, thank you, Todd. Unfortunately, in today's society, some women's strengths are viewed as weaknesses. Yeah, I completely agree with you. So let's just start with the very basic, the strength of the ability to bear a child. Yeah. Oh my goodness. If a woman is working a job and she has to, has to become pregnant, and all of a sudden she can only get 60% of her salary depending on what country she's living in, and that only for 12 months, and the situation that women are put in, and they almost have to kind of hide away from their friends to have the child because all of their lady friends are, oh, I just got promoted to the head of HR, and I just got promoted to sales international, I don't know what, and traveling all over the world. And, oh, I'm just pregnant and I want to have a baby. And they look at you like, oh my God. And there's just silence. And it's like almost like a form of ostracism for a woman to have a baby today. And it's unbelievable the lack of respect that women face just for wanting to be mothers, yeah, in today's society, by their own gender. This is the kind of the crown of absurdity of the extremes of today's feminism, that women themselves criticize their own female sisters for becoming pregnant and having a baby. They start to kind of become ostracized and pushed out of the social circle. Yeah, you see this a lot in the West. And I'll challenge anyone who says that's not true. I'll challenge anyone who says it's not true. It is true. Look at yourselves and be honest. It is the way it is, yeah? And I'm sorry for females who have to go through this. I'm really sorry, because I think that we should be putting mothers, especially at a time in Europe and North America where there's a drastic drop in the birth rate. We should be the very first to cherish women and becoming pregnant and becoming mothers and honor their role in society. And it's sad that this is exactly the opposite of what's happening. In a lot of countries, you need two incomes just to survive. Women have to work. Now, I agree with what you say, but this is very hard to view on the logical level. But I want to give it to you on the experiential level, okay? The fact is that, or let's say the energetic experience is that when a male and a female commit to a certain type of relationship, be it that the male would fulfill more the masculine role in terms of earning the money and taking care of the finances and the overall well-being of the family from the outside, and the woman would focus more on taking care of the home and basically stabilizing the family and raising the children to a large extent, um, and basically keeping the back of the male free so that he can go out and work. Surprising things happen. Okay, surprising things happen. Opportunities arrive for the male in the outward part of the world in order that a larger amount of income can come in. And it's quite logical that it would be that way because, of course, if the male is free to manifest this masculine kind of experience, which includes pay raises, promotions, going through life as such, and growing along the social ladder, then of course it can only be done when the woman or the female in the background is taking care of all the internal things such as raising the children, taking care of the cooking and the household, and keeping a harmonious and a clean relationship between the husband and wife and between the parents and the family and the children, of course. uh Typically feminine activities, yeah. So a balance between the masculine and the feminine does not mean necessarily that the woman has to work just as many hours as the man, and the man has to be at home just as many hours as the woman. It can manifest that way. There's nothing wrong with it, nothing bad about it. But as I said, surprising things happen and surprising opportunities are created when a woman decides to take on a more feminine role in the family and a male decides to take on a more masculine role. So, in a Muslim relationship, unless there's what you call darurat, which is what you're mentioning, darurat is what is called necessity to, because of maybe some short-term income situations or things like that, which I completely sympathize with and agree with what you're saying. There may be certain situations where a woman has to work, in fact, in order to support the family. And we're not even talking about situations where the man is martyred somehow or dies early and the woman is left alone, widowed with the children, or the man is just a lazy ass and he doesn't work. Yeah, so we're not talking about those kind of situations. Of course, there are also those situations, and that's very difficult for a woman. And so there is a darurat, a so-called darurat, or a necessity where the woman should work. But we're talking more about the general ideal of where Islamic family relationships and gender relationships should be according to the Quran and the Sunnah, inshallah. So this always ends up affecting the raising of kids as well. Exactly. Most kids these days are being raised by the internet. Absolutely, 100%. I'm going to give you a big thumbs up on that, Todd, because unfortunately that is exactly the case. When the children are left alone because the parents are both working and no one is paying them any attention, what are they going to do? They're going to grab their iPad and they're going to start looking in the internet, and they're going to find all the wrong things on the internet, and they're going to, and the thing that saddens me the most is that their internet will be more teachers for them than the parents will be, because both of the parents are focused on raising on creating a career or somehow going up the career ladder. And if the one is traveling, the other is at home, and if the one is at home and the other is traveling, and so on. And children are just left alone, maybe with a babysitter, or maybe just the babysitter, as you said, is the iPad and the iPhone and the internet, yeah, or the Samsung, as it may be, whatever is the technology. So you're absolutely right, and it's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame on today's human society that this should be the case. Children should still enjoy having a mother and a father at home, being raised by both parents, and especially having the tender, loving, motherly care that only a mother can provide. I repeat, that only a mother can provide. Okay, I have another chat. I've literally seen kids like that. They just watch TV and YouTube because their parents don't want a parent. Yeah. It's not even that they might not want to, and that's terrible. That's also terrible. but they might not be able to because they both have to work, as you mentioned, right? Or they both want to work, which is the worst case, yeah? So, so if a family can somehow survive with maybe a smaller apartment, maybe a little bit less going to restaurants outside, maybe a few less vacations per year, if you can somehow budget a little bit differently and live a more humble life, then almost always one income is enough. I'll say that almost always the income of the male would be enough. وَأَلَهُ الْأَعْلَمُ, and Allah is wisest. I know there are many exceptions to the rule, and I'm not trying to blanket case everyone's situation. I'm just speaking on a bell curve, okay? On a bell curve, for those who don't know, it means that basically the two 10% extremes, if we cut them off on the side, we have about 80 to 90% in the middle of most cases in the world, and that's what we're talking about here. The overwhelming majority of the cases, if people are willing to live a little bit more humbly on the outside in the materialistic ways, then normally one income is sufficient and it allows the other partner, typically the female, to spend more time at home, taking care of the children, taking care of the family needs, the husband's needs, and the cleanliness and harmoniousness of the family lifestyle, inshallah. If the male works a minimum wage job, then it definitely is not enough. I'm going to say that it depends on the country, okay? It depends what country. In Denmark and Germany, the minimum wage is definitely enough. I can understand that in North America is a little bit different, and in many countries in the world, it's completely different. There might probably isn't even a minimum wage in most countries, so I completely understand what you're saying. And again, what we're talking about applies only in situations which are not darurat, okay? Yeah, in Canada, it's definitely not enough. People struggle even with jobs above minimum wage. No doubt, no doubt. I don't doubt you. So what I want to introduce you to is a concept called darurat. For those who don't know what it means necessity, and of course, and it conditions, okay, many aspects of Islam, okay? For example, of course, you're not allowed to eat the meat of the swine. Okay, this is a typical don't eat pig meat. Okay, so no jamon serrano for those who know what Spanish ham is. This was a big eliminate. This is probably the biggest elimination of what I could eat when I became a Muslim for me, because I absolutely loved the famous Spanish curated ham. So I had to stop eating it. So basically, this was maybe 20, what was it now, 25 years ago that I haven't eaten Spanish ham. So if I'm in the desert and there's nothing to eat and some guy walks past me and I've been hungry for 3 days and all he has is Spanish curated ham, guess what? It's a darurat, because otherwise I might die if I don't eat it, okay? And therefore I'm going to eat it. I'm going to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make dua for penitence, maybe pray 2 rakat of forgiveness, and make tawbah and re-enter taqwa as soon as I'm back in a healthy situation, and maybe pay kafara, a small charity for balancing the sin. But in any case, there's what's called a darurat, which means a necessity, an outwardly conditioned necessity for which there is no other solution at the moment. Yeah, so certainly, poverty is obviously a darurat. We are not saying women stay at home and don't go to work. That's absolutely not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that if darurat is not an issue, in other words, if there's a certain financial independence, then it's a blessing for women to have a family, stay at home, cultivate a loving, harmonious relationship between the husband and the children and herself and the parents and the family and the relatives, and really take care of these feminine aspects of life, inshallah. So I hope that that condition of darurat has become clear. I will write a little bit about darurats in our Delta team chat, inshallah, so that we can dive into this situation a little bit more deeply. I get the appeal. I could write in game if I could stay at home. I guess so. Yeah, I mean, well, one thing that's happened, especially post-COVID, is of course, no surprise, home office, right? So even I'm able to, in my daily job, take care of home office to a certain extent, which means for the first time in my life, I'm able to see my child and children more. Before, when I had my first 2 children, I was just traveling all over the world and I wasn't able to see my children, which was really too bad. And I'm very happy that now there are home office possibilities that allow me to spend more time with my beautiful newborn child and my lovely wife at home. And this is really a blessing. It's really a blessing. And I wish it for everyone who has the opportunity to do some kind of home office with family. Really take advantage of this and spend the time with your wife and children as best you can, inshallah. Absolutely. So I hope that the concept of darurat is clear. Are there any questions on darurat? To give you another example, if someone is ill during the month of Ramadan, then it's a darurat that they should eat. They have to eat something. Yeah, they have to drink something. They might need to take their medicine, which would break their fast. So therefore, those who are ill in the month of Ramadan, because they face a situation of darurat, they are actually not allowed to fast. Okay, so fasting becomes haram upon the ill, and they should make up the fast as soon as they can after the illness has passed. Yeah, and after the month of Ramadan, inshallah. Wallahu la'ala. So let's see. There's another comment. Yeah, diabetics who don't fast. Exactly. Yeah. My lovely daughter has a certain muscle condition. She's completely healthy and playing volleyball. I just saw her play volleyball today, but she has a certain muscular condition that doesn't allow her to fast from drinking water for longer periods of time. So she has to drink during the day. So when she fasts, she might fast half a day in Ramadan or maybe a third of a day, but she can't do more because otherwise it would endanger her muscular system. So therefore, fasting the full Ramadan would be haram for her. So of course she doesn't do it, although she does try her best to fast as long as she can. So there are many examples like that. So if anyone has any questions on darurat after the class, then I'm very happy to go deeper into the subject. It's a very deep and very beautiful subject, which shows us, as the Quran says, Quran Kabir says, Islam is meant to be easy for its followers. Okay, so Azadi Islam retains a great variety of juridical principles for revitalizing Islam for every age, as we will discuss during year 2, principles of jurisprudence, where I hope to see you all, and a few others who are not in today's class, but I know that they're very interested and they're hot to join us in year 2. They're watching the videos in parallel. And so as we'll discuss in year 2, Zaidi Islam, particularly because it focuses so much on reason, number one, and on contemporary application of the fiqh, as opposed to most schools of Islam, which are buried way in the past and have a very rigid sense of application of the law. Zaidi Islam is exactly the opposite. And so contemporary societal challenges affecting gender issues such as industrialization, women in the workplace, the advent of birth control, digitalization of many aspects of human life, the introduction of women in a huge way into the typical classically male workforce and all such, all of these societal revolutions or civilizational revolutions can be dealt with in a manner befitting Islam and containing Islamic principles as their backdrop. Now, why do we say Islamic principles? Well, why should they be Islamic? Well, it's more the opposite. What principles can we apply in order to guide these civilization revolutions in a way that everyone has a spiritual added value? Everyone has a personal internal added value, and therefore the society as a whole raises its energy level and raises its added value. And this can be done by properly interpreting and then applying the Shariat for its particular age. And we will certainly study this in a contemporary and a fresh manner, by the way. And we shall certainly examine this in year 2, Usul al-Fiqh, principles of jurisprudence, next year, inshallah. And I welcome you there, and I hope to see you all there, inshallah. So therefore, rather than a forced militant feminist approach leading to gender obliteration and depriving our lovely sisters of all their God-given feminine capacities, such as beauty, femininity, motherhood, and love, as well as thereby, in parallel, depriving men of their physical advantages and societal contributions and added value and recognition, Islam chooses to rely on gender equality through compatibility based on cherishing, reconciling, and honoring each gender. This we consider to be true feminism, namely a feminism in which a woman may proudly embrace her feminine, loving, divine, and motherly qualities. Any questions, any comments on the above? Otherwise, I would appreciate to end on one of my favorite quotes from the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Verily, men and women devoted to Allah, believing men and believing women, obedient men and obedient women, honest men and honest women, patient men and patient women, humble men and humble women, men helping the needy and women helping the needy, fasting men and fasting women, chaste men and chaste women. Look at that. Chaste men and chaste women. Men and women who remember Allah Ta'ala. For all of these men and women, Allah Ta'ala has prepared the gift of forgiveness as well as the miraculous reward. Sadiq Allahul Aliyul Azim. Quran, Surah 33, verse 35. And I hope you find the time to follow up in this next probably month and a half until we have our next class, because again, in Ramadan, we will not be teaching this year, as every year, because in Ramadan, as Imam Razvi alayhi salam taught me, Ramadan is a time for peace and inner focus and inner spiritual development, and a time in which all those teaching and all those learning should withdraw into themselves and look in the inner side of spiritual development. And so with that, I'm just going to give you a homework, a team exercise, as we do every month. And I appreciate that we fulfill it in the chat in Team Delta, as we've been doing very well this year, by the way. So I appreciate all your contributions. And the team exercise will be to please try to find a or several examples really on different levels of the manifestation of masculine and feminine within Islam, or in the world through Islamic principles, or even in the universe through Islamic principles. One of the first graduating year one theses that I received in the very first year that we did this program was based on this principle, Islam being gender compatibility, and our lovely student dove very, very deep into the idea of how the entire universe is based on a balance of male and female, masculine and feminine energies. And so I highly encourage you to contribute in the chat. And this is a great subject again for a final thesis. And so for those of you either here now, or for those sisters and brothers who may be watching in the aftermath, preparing themselves for year two next year, remember that we want to submit a final thesis. So I would appreciate to have your first draft around June, July-ish of this year. And we can talk about it beforehand individually, what every student would like to provide as an idea of one of the 10 principles that we study during the year. These principles of Imam Razvi, these principles of Usul ad-Din, or the roots of the faith, as we call them. For example, today Islam is gender compatibility, or last month Islam is justice. We've had so many thus far, and another 3 more to go after Ramadan. And then, proceeding to your final thesis, think about taking one of these 10 principles of Islam and developing it into a 3 to 5 page final thesis, and submitting a first draft maybe around July-ish, maybe submit your first ideas in the month of May and June, and then we will all present our final theses together in our final Hawza, or our final class of the academy for this academic year, around July, August, probably more like August. And then each of you can defend your final thesis online, inshallah, which will mean you present your thesis for 10 to 15 minutes. And then those who are listening and probably defending themselves also will ask some questions as regards to your thesis. And I will probably also ask 1 or 2 questions and ask for some highlights of your thesis, inshallah. So please take this opportunity to begin already to study the past principles again, go through those again. For those who need any material extra that they haven't received, please contact me additionally. I'll be happy to supply you the material, the syllabus. This is a syllabus here that we went through today. They're always 1 page. So basically 10 pages, okay? It's not too much to read, I hope. and familiarize yourself with the 10 pages and watch the videos and think about a great final thesis topic that you would like to take with you in master or take to your next level and deep dive into that. And then let me know around May, June, what you would like to specialize in. And then we'll start to prepare for you a path toward your final thesis, inshallah, after which, having submitted and defended properly, and of course having paid your tuition fee and or supported the Hawza in a different way if you didn't have financial ability at the time, whatever the case may be, once we've checked all those boxes, you may then get your certificate completion for year 1, Usul ad-Din, Principles of Islam, and then you can move on to year 2, Islamic Jurisprudence, which is a very intense and I would say mind-blowing, truly mind-blowing course for most people about how deep and wide and expansive Islamic fiqh is and can be if we were to apply reason, number 1, and deep dive into the principles as the contemporary situation demands, as well, part 2. So, and what we do there is we ask wild questions. So right now, the first year 2 was about economic lending during the COVID crisis. And the second question for the second year 2 class was are genetically engineered foods for human beings halal or haram, which is another, hugely expansive topic. So we do tackle a lot of really interesting questions in year 2 and modern, contemporary, future-focused questions. I'm not going to ask you, what is the cost of 2 camels for a slave girl or something like this. These crazy kind of fiqhy questions that were answered maybe 1,300 years ago. We're really going to focus on modern, futuristic, digital type of questions that will accompany the development of humanity into the future, inshallah. And I really hope that to see you in year 2 jurisprudence, inshallah. Year 2 seems complex since different sects have different rules. Exactly, Sister Jana. And that's the beauty of it. Because is a rose not geometrically complex? Are the constitution of the planets not geometrically complex, and yet they're so beautiful? And to bring out this beauty, sometimes a certain complexity is necessary. I want to answer that by saying complex and simple at the same time, okay? It's complex because it's a lot of work, okay? So you need to check all the sources. You couldn't simply say, well, I belong to Maliki school, therefore I will just check Maliki madhab. It doesn't work like that in true Zaydi fiqh, okay? In true Zaydi fiqh, which relies on reason and contemporary application, those 2 principles, reason and contemporary application, we would need to take the most futuristic type of questions and apply the usul al-fiqh, or the roots of jurisprudence, in our own way, okay? And that does indeed mean typically to go through, for example, the schools of the Ahlul Sunnah, the schools of the Ahlul Shia, Jafari, Ismaili, the different Zaydi Imams, and see what has been said historically. But a large part of the fiqh is not about what someone else said or what he said in the year 300 after Hijrah, or what he said in India in a specific context after 250 years after Hijrah or something like this. But it's really about the application now, applying reason. So on the other hand, it's also very simple. So it's complex, but it's also very simple at the same time, okay? An obvious example of this is that in Jafari fiqh, we can't eat shellfish. And you might be surprised to hear that the Hanafi school has the same verdict. So also the Hanafis do not permit shellfish. They see it as haram, okay? So whereas the other schools, whether it's Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, or whether it's Zaydi, Ismaili, there are no real limitations on shellfish, and it doesn't really become clear or concludently clear from the Quran, Wallahu a'lam, and God knows best. But in fact, the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, Quddus Sirat, and of course the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, according to the Ja'fari school of jurisprudence, following Imam Sadiq al-Jafar alayhi salam, also follow this particularly, they share this commonality in the fiqh, okay? But on for example, zakat, yeah, the Jafari school and the Hanafi school go in completely different directions, okay? So in Jafari Islam, only certain types of wealth are applicable for zakat, whereas in Hanafi school, all forms of wealth are subject to zakat, with very few exceptions, okay? So it just shows that on some things, schools can be aligned in one way and they can be separate in another. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with these are Ahlul Sunnah and these are Ahlul Shia, but it can be mixed across all the different madhahib. For example, those who pray with their hands on the side are not only the Shia schools, Sayyidi Ismaili Ja'fari, but also the Ibadis from Oman, and also the Maliki school, as a matter of fact, from North Africa. So many are surprised that also members of Ahlul Sunnah would pray with their hands on the sides, but this is also established in the Maliki school. So there are different overlaps and correlations in the different schools, and certainly when we deep dive into a particular methodology of the Usul al-Fiqh, we'll look into those. At the same time, we will also apply that kind of cross madhab or cross traditional cross-section type of look into the specific fiqh question that we pose to ourselves, or the hypothesis that we pose to ourselves in the practical case study. So year 2 consists of a theoretical and also a practical. Theoretical part where we derive all the criteria for the usul al-fiqh, of course, and their application, and in fact, their enforcement. And also the practical part where we take a really cool high-level question and we apply it to the principles. And Sister Jana, I think you had a very interesting question that you wanted to ask for year 2, and I can't remember whether it was about slavery in Islam or what was the subject. I just it's slipping my mind. I know you had a great question, but maybe it will occur to you again. I think you even typed it in the chat. But anyway, we'll go back to it, or maybe hopefully if you join us, inshallah, in year 2, then you're more than welcome to suggest that as our case study, okay? And we'll take in all the suggestions, and then if there are many different suggestions, then everyone who's involved will just vote, and hopefully we'll come up with a good consensus of which question to ask. Okay, that's a lot of advertising for year 2, and also requests for you to please come up with your final thesis. But before that, please also remember to do your team exercise. I'll mention it again in the team chat. I'll post the video, I'll post the syllabus, I'll remind you of the team exercise, which is to find some masculine and feminine expressions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through humanity, through Islam, through the universe, and so on. And apart from that, if we don't speak again personally, I wish you a wonderful, blessed month of Ramadan, inshallah, and many spiritual awareness in this time. And anytime you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out either in the group chat or directly to me, as the case may be. وَأَلَّهُ لَا أَعْلَمُ اللَّهُمَّ صَلِّ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. Please, I ask you to raise your hands and say with me Fatiha, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli. Ameen. Thank you very, very much. I wish you all a wonderful, lovely week and time before Ramadan, a wonderful Ramadan. And I hope to see you again in our next class, the 8th principle of Islam after Ramadan, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.